Welcome to Wrestling Chat with Friends, the Tuesday show. I'm EJ the Collector, here as always with my tag team partner, TG, who tonight, he's in mourning. He's made the claim that, rest in peace, MMM, Maximum Male Models, hasn't been officially announced, but Tom is leaning into it based on some recent events we've seen. It looks like Maximum Male Models may be done for if they were ever off to start. TG, how you feeling tonight, man?
I would say I'm concerned. Concerned for the well-being of Marseille and Mansois. Concerned for a future that doesn't have male models, maximum or otherwise.
Were they drafted?
They were. Yeah,
Okay.
they were. They were drafted to Raw. And at the time, I was like, oh, that's good because Pretty Deadly had been called up and drafted to SmackDown. I was like, it's good to separate them because there's a little overlap there.
Yep.
But then they haven't been on TV since they were drafted.
No, they haven't.
But Maxine has, that's hence the RIP. Because I'm like, well, obviously she's doing something else now.
Maximum Male Models can't keep a leader of that group, can they?
No matter how many people they rebrand as someone with the last name Dupree, they cannot maintain a leader.
The Dupree family is just going to vanish into existence. We're happy to be here tonight. We're happy y'all are here. Thank you for the privilege of your time. Hope you're watching us live on Twitter, on Facebook, on YouTube. Join our groups, spread the word. We're growing this community all the time. So we're going to get into, we don't need to do a full Money in the Bank preview because we're still a couple of weeks out, but some interesting developments have happened like in the last week, in the last couple of days, actually. That has made me even more excited for Money in the Bank than I was previously. Money in the Banks are always great since the advent of the women's matches. We've had two. They go a good 50 minutes to an hour. They take up roughly a little over a quarter of the show, half a show when you factor them both in. And the last few years have not disappointed. Probably the most memorable Money in the Bank moment in recent memory was the COVID year. They did it on the roof of Titan Towers, which is actually no longer Titan Towers. They have moved into their new building in Stamford. Allegedly, if I remember correctly, was it Malachi Black under his Aleister Black? Was that his name in WWE?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Aleister getting tossed off the roof, as well as Rey Mysterio getting tossed off the roof by...
I don't remember Aleister Black being in the match. I remember Rey Mysterio getting tossed off the roof.
Someone else got thrown off the roof too. It was by Baron Corbin, right?
I thought it was just Rey, and it was Baron Corbin. I don't remember the rest of it.
If correct me if I'm wrong, Cheats or anyone else out there, I believe there were two people thrown off the building that night. I think Malachi Black was one of them, and I think Rey Mysterio was the other.
Here's what I remember about that night. I remember that AJ Styles and Seth got into a fight in Vince McMahon's office.
AJ and Brian and Daniel Bryan.
That's right, Daniel Bryan. And then Otis won, but then never cashed in.
Never cashed in, lost it at some point or something like that.
To The Miz, yeah.
Yeah. That's sort of a memorable moment for me, like in the last few years, that gets replayed a lot, the throwing off the building. And in my opinion, the greatest cash-in was Dolph Ziggler on Alberto Del Rio. In that, wasn't it like a post-WrestleMania crowd or something like that?
It was...
Or was it?
I don't think it was... I can't remember now. It's.
I think it might have been England, or... It was either an English crowd or a really hype post-WrestleMania crowd.
It was probably the biggest pop. I think the best cash-in was Seth at WrestleMania.
Yeah, no argument there. That's going to be a good one, too. But outside of those matches, which I do want to talk about because they're going to be exciting, we got sort of a couple of main events that were booked on Raw. And I'm just going to ask this. Most of if you're watching us tonight, I'm guessing you probably watch Raw, you probably watch SmackDown, you kind of know what's going on. I know we're not breaking any news here. But I'll ask you, Tom.
Mm-hmm.
I was scrolling videos earlier, and I saw an interview with John Cena, and he was talking about Roman Reigns. And he accurately described Reigns currently as being in his own universe. And he most certainly is. So put Roman Reigns' universe aside for just a second. Is Cody versus Dom the best matchup that you can give the fans going into this match? Because I'm going to submit to you, yeah, it probably is.
I will go as far as to say it is the number one baby face in the company against the number one heel in the company.
No doubt. No doubt. I mean, Roman Reigns is supposed to be a heel, but he gets roundly cheered.
He's by far the biggest star. But
he's in his own universe.
His own
right.
thing.
He's in his own universe. So for outside of that universe, I agree. Cody is the number one babyface. Seth Rollins is right behind him at 1A. Going up against, there is no 1A or B. It's the number one heel that elicits the most visceral reaction of anyone in the company right now, Dom Mysterio.
I told somebody this the other day. Are you an NFL fan at all?
I'm an NFL observer, watcher. I wouldn't say fan.
I was talking about the Dom Mysterio phenomenon, and I said this would be like going back to, as we said before, like going back to 2021 or early 2022 and explaining this to somebody. I said this would be like if somebody from like Christmas of 24 traveled back in time right now and they said, you know who the best quarterback in the NFL is, like statistically in the future from whence I came? It's Brett Rippon. You'd be like, Brett Rippon? What? Like, come on, that guy can barely get on the field. Are you telling me he's like? If you had told me he was out of the league, I would have been less surprised. No, it's he threw for 5,500 yards and 50 touchdowns this year. He's the number one quarterback. That is the equivalent of this, and the fact that he is sort of the nephew of Mark Rippon, I think kind of ties into that a little bit. But it's just like I can't explain it. The reaction that he's going to get from that crowd in London is going to probably be the biggest reaction he's ever gotten. And I think similar with Cody. I think Cody is, again, in terms of a pure babyface reaction, he is, I think, the best they have right now. And I'm looking forward to it.
And let's not forget, this is happening in London. This isn't a hot Chicago crowd. This isn't a hot take your pick crowd. This isn't even Madison Square Garden, man. This is the O2 Arena in London.
Yeah.
It's going to be 20,000 people, but we have seen when WWE has traveled overseas, those crowds chant. It's like they're at a football game, soccer game here in America. They'll have their own chant, their own unique chants. They will, what has organically happened in the last few weeks is that as soon as Dom's about to touch the mic, the crowd is now in unison, understanding what the gimmick is. It's to drown him out with booze.
Yeah.
The crowds in England will do that with anybody. So to have the motivation to know that that's now the thing, just like they're going to sing Seth Rollins' song, and I want to get to that too.
Yeah, let's get to that.
Yeah, they're going to sing Seth Rollins' song. They're gonna his reaction's going to be incredible. So again, another one of these things, and I love when this happens in wrestling, when something organically happens that becomes a phenomena that in the course of 1 or 2 weeks, the crowd is conditioned to understand what they're supposed to do. It's no edict that the WWE announced, tried to promote, teased. It's just sort of organically happened. You can kind of take this back to the beginnings of the Steve Austin "What" chant. That was even sort of Stone Cold's thing that the crowd just sort of was feeding off of. We think of other organic, chants and movements, because few things have become so big as Seth's song singing. As we saw last night, they did it for an entire promo. They sang it for about 12 minutes to the point where Seth had to address it. Finn had trouble getting started. Also, I'm sure they were both loving it because it was getting the response it should have gotten. But
I bet Finn wasn't. I would bet Finn was not pleased. But
you think so?
Yeah. I hate it. I hate it so much. It's great that the crowd is engaged, but just like the Steve Austin "What" chant, which I
did not like the Steve Austin "What" chant.
It's cool that the fans are into something, obviously, but the point where it becomes counterproductive to telling a story, getting a story across, is where I think the negatives outweigh the positives. So at least with the what chant can be part of a promo, whereas this is just like, I mean, this was supposed to be a hugely important promo for Finn in terms of not only getting to the next chapter of the story, but also obviously there's something happening with his character. Maybe he's going to get kicked out of the Judgment Day. Something is happening there. And it's great that the crowd's into it, but if they are into it in a way that makes it impossible for them to convey important story points, then I think it's a net negative. Contrast that with like Dom, where it's like, look, we know what's going to happen here. If Dom doesn't get his lines out, it's fine because he has like 3 lines and the whole point is just to do this. So what I think they need to do moving forward in acknowledgement of this reality is, if they have someone who's working with Seth who has like a really important message to get across, that needs to be either done via a solo promo with Seth not out there, or a backstage segment or something like that. Because otherwise you're sabotaging your own ability to get these important messages across, I think.
Do you believe, so I would assume that you believe going forward next Monday, and maybe even going forward after, forget Finn Balor, this will be the MO of the crowd as long as Rollins has this. They discovered a new piece of this. They sing him when he comes into the ring. Yeah. They serenade him before he starts his promo. Last night was so dramatic and kind of out of nowhere that, do you believe this will be the MO going forward? That this is now, sounds like you don't like it, but is this actually a problem that they have to solve with maybe something like you recommended? Because in a month and a half, when Drew McIntyre comes out or whoever to challenge Seth, is this now part of Seth's package now? Character?
Yeah, I think yes. I think another reason why I don't like it is his song sucks. It's not even a song. It's a 5-second loop. There's no words, and there's barely even any music. It's different than like Judas, which I think is a fun rock song, and it has lyrics, and it's like, that's cool. Sure. This is just a very repetitive thing over and over for 12 minutes, and it's just, even if I were there live, I'd be like, oh, this is tedious. This is annoying. So to answer your question, yes, they're going to have to factor this in, and they are going to either have to put him against. So this is where, and this is what's been interesting so far with kind of how they've matched Seth up in the short time he's been the champion. They have put him against people who are not just like let's say a Baron Corbin type, where it would be fine if he gets drowned out, totally fine. It would be, he's the frustrated, like sort of one-dimensional angry heel, and that's totally fine. They've been putting him with people where there's kind of a story there, or they're maybe teasing a face turn, like with, Damian Priest, or, when he fought AJ obviously is a face as well. And with Finn, there's all this history there. And I think all that is great from a storytelling perspective. The challenge is, if you're trying to do that in the context where you have this new sort of fan interaction thing that is going to drown out whatever is being conveyed, those two things are at odds. So what I would propose is his next feud, once he gets through whatever's going to happen with Finn, his next feud, probably it does make sense to put him against like somebody who's just more of a straightforward heel who doesn't need to cut a long promo and doesn't have history or whatever. So like a Bronson Reed type, or it doesn't have to be Bronson Reed, but I'm saying someone like that, I think would be a more effective, foil for the current version of Seth Rollins.
We addressed Seth's song. We talked about Steve Austin's what. Do you take those two and throw in the 4 years of CM Punk chants? Which, if you had to pick one, which one would you take?
Pick in terms of what?
Had to deal with on a weekly basis.
See, the CM Punk chants I was okay with because that was, number one, it was specifically like, it was really a critique of whatever they were seeing. It's like, we don't like this. We want CM Punk. And that I'm okay with. While that is counterproductive to an extent, it's also counterproductive in a way that isn't really at odds. So like the frustrating thing about both the What Chant and the Seth Rollins thing is the crowd is into the performer, but even though the reaction is positive, it is interfering with what's happening. Whereas the CM Punk chant is like, we don't like this and we're going to let you know, which I'm like, okay, that should be disrupted. That makes total sense. So of those three, I'd say the only one that I didn't hate was the CM Punk chant. But the other two are just Seth's is the worst of the three from a interfering with story perspective.
And no more so than last night that we saw.
Yeah, it's just, again, I admit I am not the median probably viewer of this stuff.
I am super focused on I know.
Well, but also I think I'm hyper focused on like this storytelling, like structure and like getting plot across and how to convey that. And that's why, like, as we've talked about 1,000 times and we'll continue to talk about, if you look at how like the Bloodline storyline is so great because of how many little subtle, brilliant points they can work into every segment that they do.
Yeah.
And so when I look at something like on paper, and I think up until that promo Monday, the most interesting story that had been developing the last few weeks had been what was going on around Judgment Day. Because you have like a really interesting Rhea character, a really interesting and over Dom character. And then you have the history with Seth and Finn and also Damian Priest, like what he's kind of evolving into. So all four kind of interesting. And so my frustration that you're hearing tonight is the frustration with like, oh God, now they've created a roadblock for themselves in having this become, obviously Bloodlines again is a category by itself, but become a really good wrestling, like long-term wrestling story. And this is now going to be an impediment to that as long as Seth is entangled with whatever they're doing. So that's the frustration.
Seth said something in his promo with Finn last night that I want to ask you about. He said this is the best version of Seth Rollins that there's ever been. Agree or disagree?
Totally disagree. I think in the ring, Seth is awesome. I think the work that he's doing in the ring is as good as he's ever been. So from that standpoint, agree. This character, to me, is the most, the old cliche at this point with wrestling is like, oh, you take your natural personality, you turn it up to 11. That is true for some guys. But with other guys, you can have a really effective character that doesn't necessarily have to be you. I mean, Broken Matt Hardy is not Matt Hardy, but it's a really interesting character. We've talked about Bray Wyatt. When Bray Wyatt is at his best, really interesting character, other than sort of the interest in that genre generally, that's not who, Wyndham Rotunda is. So it doesn't necessarily have to be that. But what it does have to be is you have to have an authentic connection to the character, just like any actor or performer, so that you can portray it in a way that comes across as credible, sincere, whatever word you want to use. With Seth, it always seems like there's like this just layer of it's very clear this is a wacky character I'm portraying, and the best that he's been in my opinion during this run were those promos with Riddle, where it sort of got like below the belt, and they both got like legit, like acted like they were legitimately mad. I was like, yes, this is really good. And so it's not that Seth can't do it; he's an amazing performer. I think this character is a little too much affect and a little too much like I'm just not into it. Like all the laughing and stuff. It's like that's not him. I don't think.
If we've learned one thing about Seth Rollins over the years is that he is in that vein, I believe. I'm not putting him in the same class, although you probably make the argument. He will be looked at in that Chris Jericho, Shawn Michaels vein as someone who is constantly evolving, has unique characters. If even before they get stale, he's reinvented himself a few times. Some people like more than others. This one is super over. It's not your favorite.
It's over.
And I get all the reasons why, and I don't even disagree with them. I'm starting to look at Seth now as one of these, and I don't like the word lifer. Like, I don't care what you do in your career where you want to go and do. But he's one of these guys that is going to be sort of the Bret Hart to Roman's Shawn Michaels, the Austin to The Rock. These two will appear, if they both stay healthy, stay with the company, this era, this sort of mid-John Cena, this post-John Cena era could very well be defined. They obviously are going to define it by Roman, with Seth being sort of their careers will forever be intertwined. And I think even like sort of Cena had his Orton, Rollins and Reigns are poised to dance around and towards each other many times in years going forward.
Yeah, they're both obviously very, very elite performers. And I think that what also makes them, I agree with everything you just said. I think what also makes them compelling from a viewer standpoint is that they are very different. And I don't just mean like their characters are obviously different, especially now with Seth doing what he's doing, but also, in the ring. I mean, they've got different size, different kind of approach, different style. Roman Reigns has really done and this is something we haven't really talked about much because we're appropriately so focused on the story and how good it is. This iteration of Roman Reigns, and I won't belabor this point because I know we're talking about Raw, but this iteration of Roman Reigns, he has done something that I would have said, at the beginning of this run probably wasn't possible, which is he has developed the perfect WWE main event style as if it's from the old WWF days, and it works. Yeah. It works beautifully in 2023. And the reason it works, and we talked about it after the last Night of Champions, the last PLE, he is able through storytelling, a la, Hulk Hogan, although Hulk Hogan obviously more limited in the ring than what Roman can do athletically. But he, like those vintage guys, he is able to make for compelling viewing, literally for minutes at a time without even executing a move. And that is something that if you had said to me, like, is that possible in the with as smart as the audience is now, as interested in sort of in-ring work and as sophisticated as the audience is now, is that possible? And 3 years ago, I would have said, no, you can't really do that anymore. And that's not true. I mean, be clear, he's a really good athlete and can definitely, work. Don't get me wrong. But the fact that there's still a path for him to work that sort of WWE main event style, like methodical, and I don't mean that as derogatory. I mean, like, we're going to tell a story here and take our time the way that somebody like a Steve Austin would have, or certainly, someone before that would have. And it works, and the crowd is laser focused on it. That is a testament to just how good he has gotten in the last few years.
Without a doubt, I agree with every word you just said. So just sort of final thought on Money in the Bank for this week, since we are so a few weeks off. If you want to get a crowd, even a crowd in Great Britain, hype from the get-go, you put Seth on first. That gets that. I mean, Seth's got a history of going on first in a couple of these big events. Get that crowd singing, get them all hyped up. I think he's likely to go over on Finn Balor because the storyline there is more about the Judgment Day than about Finn and Seth probably. But I see that as going on first. That leaves, Cody and Dom, as hot as that would be, on this PLE, probably does not main event either. In the past, the men's matches have not always main evented it. And I don't think it's going to happen this year because if you have Roman Reigns on a show, he's main eventing. Am I right on that?
You are, but he's not on the show.
Yeah, him and Sikoa are going to face the Usos. Right?
Is that confirmed for Money in the Bank?
Didn't I see that on Twitter? Isn't that happening?
I don't know. It's not right now. I was going to say the rule has been rule that I made up, I guess, that since Cody has been in WWE and has been healthy, Cody always main events unless Roman's on the show, in which case Roman main events. Now, the difference here is that because it's a declaration. Yeah, because it's Money in the Bank, maybe that the thought is different, just like at Royal Rumble, that might be different. But I think
I swear I thought I heard that announced. Am I?
I think they might save that for SummerSlam. I think that's your SummerSlam main event.
Okay. Yeah, that's going to have to develop a little bit more. So we're saying that Roman's not going to be on this card.
I don't think so.
Okay.
But who knows? I mean, this Friday.
There's still a few
Yeah, I mean,
SmackDowns they have to address.
there's only 4 matches on the card right now. The men's Money in the Bank, women's Money in the Bank, and then the title match, Finn and Seth, and then Dom and Cody.
I'm sure on the cusp of announcing Asuka and Charlotte Flair. Also, I'm presuming, but we'll see. I could be getting ahead of myself.
I like that half of this show is us trying to remember things that is like readily available information.
I know. That's what we have a producer behind the scenes here. Cheats can help us out at any time.
Speaking of my frustrations, Charlotte Flair.
Yeah, let's hear it. I know. She came back as a babyface.
Of course, came back as a babyface. Interrupted the championship, rechristening ceremony. I'm just like, guys, can we just everybody chill out? Charlotte's going to get to 17. We know she's going to get 17. It doesn't have to happen like in the next 4 months. Can we just chill out, people?
Right.
Right. You just had Asuka beat Bianca Belair, which was a big deal.
Mm-hmm.
First time Bianca's lost in a year plus, or about a year. It drives me crazy. So, to go back to the match order, the match order on this card is going to be really hard to figure out, and I'll tell you one reason why. I honestly am not sure what the crowd reaction is going to be to Finn. Obviously, Seth is going to be over, but I think the crowd is going to be pretty into Finn, especially since they've they're teasing a character shift. So that by the time we get to July 1st, he might be like more of a tweener at that point. And then in front of that crowd, you could see. I could definitely see them doing a thing where Seth wins, but Finn maybe shakes his hand or something like that, and then of course he gets the boot from Judgment Day. JD McDonough stabs him in the back and joins Judgment Day, just like Finn stabbed Edge in the back or whatever, that kind of thing. So the reason I say that is because I think if you think that's going to be the reaction and the crowd's going to be super into it, I would be tempted maybe to make that the main event. Especially if, and this is the other caveat, especially if there's any chance that Damian Priest could win Money in the Bank, then it becomes really complex, because then you've got another Judgment Day guy who has the briefcase. You got a Judgment Day guy going for the title. I mean, there's a lot of different ways you could go. So I don't know. I think, but I will say this, last thought on this. Again, the rule has been Cody main events if Roman isn't there. I get that. I think because he's wrestling Dom, it's going to be super hot. Dom obviously isn't seen as, even though they're definitely giving him the rocket ship, he isn't seen as like a true main eventer. So I think that probably puts that match on first, or one of the Money in the Bank matches on first. I think it's important for them to have the new World Heavyweight title main event a pay-per-view, because the tournament final was the first match. And I think you don't want to establish this as, again, it's already been kind of set up derisively as a consolation prize. I think by having it main event a pay-per-view or two here and there, you really get across the idea that no, this is a really important title as well, even though this is something else we got to talk about. The other one still says Undisputed, and then you saw that when they rolled out the new one for Asuka, hers says Undisputed too, which is insane.
Well, let's get to that point, because we have talked about this for weeks, that kind of for several weeks now, the WWE thought they were getting over on their fans and said, hey, we haven't actually, the Raw SmackDown champions on the Raw champions on SmackDown, SmackDown's on Raw. No one has brought it up to us yet, so we're going to see how long it can go. They've sort of solved it. They have, again, kind of like they did with Raw and SmackDown, they have sort of aligned these titles. And okay, so help me out with it.
Yeah,
Roman is the undisputed WWE heavyweight
Universal
Universal heavyweight champion.
They usually don't say heavyweight, but yeah. You know, Paul Heyman says heavyweight, but yeah, Universal champion.
Universal WW undisputed WWE
Universal champion, correct.
Asuka is she now the WWE Women's Champion?
Yes.
Okay, so kind of like they've done in the past, the WWE lineage is the titles on SmackDown.
Yeah, except hers technically would still have I think Raw Women's title lineage with it, because that's what the title was.
Well, sort of, yeah, just forget historical lineage again. Yeah. They're both sort of synced up as WWE titles.
Yes, correct. WWE, SmackDown, World title, Raw.
Okay, that I believe, you know, when they had the 10 pounds of gold and they had the WWE spinner belt back in the day, that was sort of presented that way too, right? One was WWE Championship, one was the World Championship. They have sort of brought that back full circle. They have also, you know, we were curious if everyone was getting new titles, and they presented Asuka and Rhea with women's versions of Seth and Roman's title. Yeah. All right, you know.
Fine with all that.
I'm fine with it because I like the look of Seth's title. I like the look of Rhea's title. The yellow background of Roman and Asuka's title, it wouldn't be my first pick, but whatever. You know, it's fun. These are now sort of established, and you know, I think we got this now. Looks like they're going to tease doing something with the women's tag team championship.
I think those are going to be unified too. I don't understand that from a booking standpoint, because the idea is, do you not want there to be women's tag titles on NXT?
Or do you want main roster talent, whoever holds those titles, showing up on NXT?
That was, if you remember, the original idea when they first recreated the women's tag titles. The idea was, they could be defended on any brand, including NXT, and then that was quickly kind of like, well, maybe not.
Yeah.
So I don't know. But to go back to so here's the thing. We talked about last time. I was fine with the new championship title. I still would have Heyman bring out the old ones just to be Heyman. But I thought it's like, fine. Roman gets a nice new title belt. I probably would have made it a little bigger, maybe, to signify it's like, this is really two titles quietly. I didn't like, and you agreed, that it still says undisputed, because you just introduced this other title on Raw. So how can it be undisputed? Okay. So that's a problem, but not as big of a problem as, for the sake of duplicating the title on the men's side, it's identical, except for the white strap instead of the black strap. Black strap.
Black strap.
But it has the word undisputed. It's like, no, it's that. At least with Roman, you can say, okay, he became the undisputed champion because he unified two titles. And even though it doesn't make sense now, we have been calling it that for the last 2 years or whatever it's been. To put that on Asuka's title makes no sense whatsoever. It was the Raw Women's title. It wasn't an undisputed title. It was one of the two titles. So anyway, again, this is the kind of thing that, I don't know, probably we shouldn't obsess over too much. It really doesn't matter, but it's,
We've had long belt segments the last few weeks, so yes. I mean, I think the short answer is the word undisputed has become sort of ubiquitous with a championship, so they just sort of use it and don't worry about its actual definition. Do you think we're going to see a unification of some kind, or a change in the title structure of the men's tag team titles? Sammy and KO are kind of the last ones walking out with two sets of belts. I would think that's going to happen, but why do you think it's not happening with the same?
Well, yeah, I think if anything, they're going to split them. And I was actually surprised, because remember, there was a brief period there a few months ago where they were like occasionally defending them separately, and when it was the Usos, obviously, and I thought that's kind of where they might be headed. And I think at this point, you know, on the men's side, there are a lot of good tag teams now, and a lot of viable tag teams. And I think that having two sets of titles would actually be beneficial to the company.
Can you take one set of those titles off Sammy and KO without also breaking up KO and Sammy? KO has been especially hot and shot out of a cannon last few weeks. It's part of his character right now, which is fantastic. KO, who gets a ton of appreciation, doesn't get enough, in my opinion. He is as good at being funny.
I was going to say nobody on WWE currently makes me like with their work makes me laugh as much as he does.
Funny, unintentionally funny, but also can be intense and angry with the same amount of vigor as he is hilarious.
So here, okay, it's a good question. I think what makes the most sense would be whether they split the titles or don't. I think they should split the titles, whether they do or don't. What makes the most sense, I think, is for the tag champs not to be KO and Sammy moving forward. Now, the primary reason for that is twofold. One, again, you've got a really good group crop of tag teams. I mean, one thing Cheats talks about a lot is like the Viking Raiders at this point, who are solid, are basically like jobbers. And you really would like to get back to a point where those guys are maybe in the mix, at least as contenders. Obviously, you have the Street Profits who haven't held the titles for a long time, and they have. You either need to break them up or put them back in the tag title picture. Yeah. Now you've got new teams coming up like Pretty Deadly, and so there's plenty of talent to go around. So I think it makes more sense from a sort of a story and booking standpoint. The other thing is, and you hit the nail on the head, like Kevin Owens really at this point, I think, is primed for like a singles run as a contender for a title, whether it's he turns heel and goes after the world heavyweight title, which I think would be great. Or maybe he's the guy that ends Gunther's Intercontinental streak down once he breaks the record. I mean, either way, here's the downside. You never say never, but I think once all of that happens, I mean, the bloodline piece has reached as far as Kevin and Sami go, has reached its natural conclusion.
Yep.
Once you end that tag team, it's hard to envision another scenario. Again, never say never, but hard to envision another scenario that gets Sami to the level that he has been for the last year. And that would be the downside. And I think that would be the trade-off, is that Sami would fall back probably to the mid-card. Because here's the thing, even if you turn Kevin heel, I don't think we want yet another Kevin Sami feud. I think you find something else for Sami to do, hopefully high profile, but that's probably the collateral damage in all this if you do it. But it's again, storyline reached a natural conclusion. Lots of good tag teams. Kevin, I think, is ready to go on another great singles run. For those reasons, I would say you pull the trigger on that probably. I don't know if it's SummerSlam or maybe before, but whenever, soon.
With Finn and Seth going at it at Money in the Bank, and with WWE having someone like Braun Breaker, who not only has done what he needs to do in NXT, he's also called out Seth Rollins. Mm-hmm. That doesn't feel like a SummerSlam matchup to me, but I think it might end up possibly being that. I don't think there's nothing in between. Is there something in between Money in the Bank and SummerSlam?
No, unless I'm missing one. Let me see. Am I missing one?
I don't think so.
No, I mean there's an NXT. No, it's the only main roster one before SummerSlam. I think they're
going to have to do Braun, and Seth. I think it would be a really hot Raw main event one week. I don't know if you need to necessarily throw Braun into a PLE with Seth, if we bring him up, but he's going to be a challenger. Lots of guys come in this kind of high profile, lose a title match and recover just fine. Some guys don't. They're obviously priming to bring Braun onto that main roster, but I don't see him PLE worthy. Would you have that be a feature of a Raw, some like in sort of like midsummer before you get to the dog days before SummerSlam?
I would be really surprised if it happened in Raw for two reasons. I think one, you do have an NXT PLE that you could put it on. The second thing is, and I think the more likely scenario is Set, because I think if I remember correctly, I think Braun alluded to this in that promo that he cut to camera. I think he challenged Seth to come to NXT to defend the title. I think he specifically said that. So I think what's going on is, this is Nick Khan trying to give NXT a ratings bump at a time when they're renegotiating with NBC Universal. And I think that's what this is mostly about. I think it's cool from a wrestling fan standpoint, the crossover with the main roster and everything that's going on. But I think it's most likely to be the main event of an NXT show post Money in the Bank. I think you'll see, whoever the Money in the Bank winner will be lurking, and it'll make for interesting television. I think you're right. I think Seth wins a competitive match. Maybe there's a tease cash in, but I don't think it happens. And then that allows them to, boost their negotiating leverage when they're trying to get NXT. I think that the big challenge with NXT as a product is that even though in theory it holds, a similar place on USA's programming as Raw does. Obviously Raw is a more featured show. It's a longer show, but still it's like primetime Tuesday, primetime Monday. It obviously is the inferior of the shows because it doesn't feature main roster stars. It's essentially a really, a somewhat developmental type product. And so to get sort of buy-in from Universal that it is a valuable asset, that they sort of have to do these sorts of things. It's akin to, sort of sweeps week type strategy that TV networks have to sort of goose ratings with guest stars or like stunt casting or gimmick shows, like, hey, we're going to do a live, edition of this sitcom or whatever the case may be. And I think that this is kind of a similar idea. I think that's what's behind it.
I got you. We're sort of like kind of coming towards thinking about maybe a final segment. I want to know kind of what's on your mind. I usually will initiate a lot of topics for discussion, but I want to kind of turn to you for a second. I want to know what you're thinking about when you're watching the product right now, something that we haven't yet brought up or talked about that you want to sort of bring into the discussion on. The floor is yours.
Okay. I actually have one because I thought about this during Raw last night. The level of women's wrestling in WWE is really astoundingly good. And comparing it to, and the reason I've thought about this recently is because it was one of those things where it's like, you think about Trish and Lita because they've come back recently. And then you start, your mind starts to wander to like, oh yeah, what was their roster like back, when they were first around? And with all due respect to, the performers who were there 15, 20 years ago, the level of improvement that they have had over the last decade, largely, I think, due to the efforts of Triple H with what he did with NXT and developing female talent there, is really amazing. I mean, you think about like how many different competitors does women competitors does WWE have right now, where you would say like, oh yeah, she is a legitimate title holder in the sense of like her matches are really good. She's obviously got a good character. Her feuds have been good, whatever. I mean, it's a long list. It's a long list. And everybody in that, like you could take, I mean, I would hazard, without looking at a list, I would be reluctant to put a number on it, but I would say you could go 10 deep with that roster and be like, wow, like all of these are legit world champions.
Let's do it. Let's take the four horsewomen out of it for a second.
Okay, I'm gonna have to look at a list because I'm gonna forget people.
Let's just start rallying up some. Let's take your Becky, your Baileys, your Charlotte. Your Bianca, and take your Ronda off the list.
Okay, so that's 5 right there. You just talked about.
We can still go.
So then Asuka, obviously
you can go one Asuka. I'm gonna say Raquel Rodriguez.
I would say she's. I think that
she's big. She's got ring ability. When I was watching her match yesterday against Shayna, I said, and I compare her to Braun.
I like Shayna a lot. I really like Shayna too.
Well, Shayna, if they didn't have Ronda, Shayna would be in a bigger spot. If Shayna was a little bit more comfortable, better at promos, then they wouldn't have needed Ronda to come back. Shayna, they've always, I think.
Yeah, because when you're not good at promos, you're like, let's bring in Ronda Rousey to really up our game on the promo department.
That may be true. I'm gonna stick with the way you described it. I think Raquel firmly falls into that right now.
Yeah.
So that's Asuka, that's Shayna. Let's give Liv that too, even though she's on the shelf right now.
Mm-hmm.
She's on that list.
Yeah.
Give me another name.
In terms of, and this is, I think, an interesting point in terms of in-ring work. I mean, Natalya is superb.
Natalya.
I mean, she's great, and they're obviously going to be doing something, different with her character. Apparently, she's going to be, which is interesting because it's weird to have somebody who has been portraying herself for the better part of 15 plus years, and to have her be repackaged. I don't know. I have other thoughts on Natalya. I feel like they haven't really done right by her character wise for forever, but that's another.
Let me give you two more: Sonya and Chelsea.
I like both of them a lot as well, and I think
when you're describing to people who could be at the top, near the top, competing for the top, those two could clearly be doing it.
The thing about Chelsea is, and this is what's interesting to me, is that I think, this is me personally, her mic work is terrific. Her character, I think, is really a really good heel character. Mm-hmm. But they don't seem, and I don't know why this is, but I feel like they don't see her as somebody who is going to win. I mean,
not right now.
They're using her as enhancement talent, which is like, it's okay. I mean, I think it's obviously better if you have enhancement talent that also has a distinctive character, and but it's, I don't know. I look at some of the other people that they seem more invested in, and I'm like, I feel like Chelsea is more interesting to me. So like, again, I don't want to say anything negative, but like Candice LeRae to me is, I'm just kind of neither here nor there. And to me, Chelsea is a much more interesting character.
Chelsea or Shotzi?
Chelsea
or Lacey Evans?
I think Lacey Evans at this point is kind of damaged goods. I mean, I think that she is not as good on the mic as Chelsea was. And the most compelling stuff that Lacey ever did on the mic was when they were building her clearly to be sort of a sympathetic face with a really interesting real life story. And then they immediately turned her heel when she came back, and I was like, what's happening? That right there. And I know I sometimes am a Vince apologist, but that right there is, to me, in terms of creative, the worst thing of all of Vince's creative related sins. Like, that's the worst thing he does, is that's like, we're going to build somebody up to be this. And it's like, I'm not feeling it anymore. Let's just turn on a dime. And it's like, well, who's the joke on? You've just wasted so much of your own valuable TV real estate to do this. Anyway.
Here's another name, Zelina.
She's solid. I think she's really good on the mic.
She proved that you can put her in a world title match high up on a PLE card, and she's not going to disappoint. Even though it was set up for her in her hometown, so she proved it didn't have to be.
Yeah. So I think, and this is what I would say is the line between someone like her versus someone at the level of, Asuka or Becky or somebody like that, is that she is like situational. But yes, she can do it, but its circumstances have to be, I think, conducive to it. Whereas somebody, obviously Bianca and that tier of folks, it's different.
Okay, I'm going to throw one last wild card question at you before we leave for the night.
Okay.
Does Money in the Bank, now there's still one more woman that they need to factor in. They have the men's list. Mm-hmm. It's got some names that you might not have expected to be in there. Santos Escobar is in there.
I think it's a great group. I think the match is going to be awesome.
Butch is in there, which would be fantastic. But he not someone you would have penciled in there. They are in London.
That's why.
So there's that. At this point, our fantasy bookings of Dom getting into the match are probably not going to happen.
Oh, I can cook up some scenarios. You want to talk White Rabbits?
Well, let me toss up possibly a whiter rabbit at you.
Yeah.
You got to bring him back at some point. Does Logan Paul make an appearance in London?
Great question.
Because you're not far from SummerSlam, and once you get past SummerSlam, you're on the road to like Survivor Series, which is on the road to the Royal Rumble, which is on the road to WrestleMania.
Yeah.
So,
I don't think Logan is going to be in a match in London if he's there. I think he's definitely going to be on the SummerSlam card somewhere.
Yeah.
I think it's most likely, if I had to bet, if I had to put money on it, I would say he appears at SummerSlam. He appears at Money in the Bank somewhere around the conclusion of the Seth match. Challenges Seth, attacks Seth, challenges him for the World Championship. Unfinished business from WrestleMania. Blah blah blah. They did wrestle at WrestleMania. That is
they did wrestle right.
So I think that's the. I don't think it's the main event because again Roman will be on the card, so ipso facto he will be in the main event. But I think that's Seth's match for SummerSlam. It's a title match against Logan. Most likely.
Not? Yeah. Why not?
But he's going to be on Raw, correct? Next week, Logan.
He will be. He will be on Raw next week.
So we'll get a hint. We'll get a hint of where things are headed when he's back. So
we won't do that. Any final thoughts on anything you're sort of waiting to see? Something conclude, something to start before we shut this show down?
I will give you one quick scenario for Dom. I agree. Yeah. It's. I mean, look, he's in a great spot right now. I mean, they're pushing him. I said this in the group chat, but like. It's not just at this point the crowd. It is like Triple H they're on board with like, okay, he's going to be the number one heel on Raw. He is like, and
amazing.
He's like 80% of the way there now.
Yeah.
So here's my one sort of Elliott-esque vis-a-vis Bray Wyatt, like crazy theory for how Dom. So Dom and Cody opened the show in London. Cody, of course, wins. Great crowd, super into it, but Cody ultimately is, dispatches Dom. I don't want to say easily, but beats him. Title match between Seth and Finn happens, like let's say in the second to last match. Main event is men's Money in the Bank. Into that match, there's some kind of issue where Damian Priest is involved, gets upset with Finn. They've already teased some tension there.
Mm-hmm.
Something happens. Priest is injured. Okay, so what do we do? Well, can you allow us a substitution? Finn just had a match. He's banged up. Damian Priest, he's now hurt because of Finn or whatever. I guess it's Dom. Dom takes the spot. He winds up on top of that ladder as people just shower him with debris.
Imagine that happening in London. Wow. I like it. The following SmackDown when Ray comes out to show the SmackDown crowd, the lights slowly start going out. Everyone holds up their cell phones. The return of we're not going to try to. I
did see a kid in an Uncle Howdy mask on Raw last night.
Most nights, one of my last thoughts before I fall asleep is like, they could bring back Bray this way. I will eternally be wishful thinking that. If you read dirt sheets, they said they're going to bring him back this summer. They said he's on the cusp of returning. They said, Vince wanted to bring back the Fiend character, but they've decided against that. But Bray's coming back. He's going to be featured on SummerSlam. At this point, I'll believe it when I see it.
Great.
Who knows? Well, we didn't have a special guest tonight. They will be joining us soon. I'm not going to say anything else about it because I'm super excited about it.
I'd like to think that I'm a special guest as well.
You're a special co-host.
Okay.
You have moved past our
Just
guest
as long
status.
as I'm special.
You are a special co-host. We've already got your handle for next week. Special co-host. You can type it in right now. Thank you out there for joining us tonight. Again, follow us on Facebook, Wrestling Chat with Friends, our group page. Follow us on YouTube. Our channel has all of our shows on there. And join Twitter at WCWF Pod if you haven't already. For TG, I'm EG the Collector. You might be here this Thursday and do a show. We got a correspondent who's going to be at the Capital One Arena tomorrow night.
Oh.
Our favorite heel and heels, Megan, has tickets for the event. So we're going to try to lure her back in. Cheats' son's baseball season's over, so Thursdays maybe even more wide open. So you would be a guest on our Thursday show because you're not the regular co-host. You're a special guest if you join us on Thursday. But we may have another special guest, and we may have heels. So join us Thursday. We don't count it out like we do on the Tuesday show. Oh, I'm getting a word from our producer. No Thursday show this week.
You made a lot of promises. Instantly hopes dead.
I sure did. Well, I cannot wait to make up for that show. We'll do a pop-up show at something. Or if not, we'll be here next Tuesday again to talk all things wrestling, all things WWE, go AEW. Enjoy Collision this weekend.
Collision,
the second coming of CM Punk. Collision will be followed by Forbidden Door 2. It'll be followed by the Wembley show. So we're going to have to, if we can't do Thursdays, find a night where we can talk about AEW or just do a 3-hour, just like Raw, we'll do a 3-hour podcast on a Tuesday and break it all down. We'll do a special AEW show, Cheese is telling us.
I think we should do a 3-hour podcast just breaking down like into intricate details of different championship belts and like our objections to those details. I think Mark is clamoring for that. So
our producer Cheats really loves extended belt segments.
Hot belt talk.
There you go. So we're tapping out tonight. I got no more left. Ring that bell. Thanks for joining us. We'll see you next Tuesday on Wrestling Chat with Friends.